think we're ready now. So welcome everybody to the May 10th meeting of the Denver Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. My name is Alex Vidal. I'm the staffer for the committee, and I will go on camera in a little bit. I just wanted to get through some of these slides first, and then I'll make sure to put a face to a name for all of you. So the first slide here is to go over public comments. So at the end of the meeting, there's a time for folks from the public to make comments to the committee. Obviously, committee members at any point, feel free to raise your hand and to make comments or ask a question. For members of the public, they're limited to 2 minutes at the end of the meeting. And you can always email questions to my email as well if that's a better way for them to ask questions. So welcome to the new committee members. I was gonna just very briefly kind of mention each of the new STRAC members and then give them a chance to introduce themselves. When you're introducing yourself, if you could talk about why you wanted to join the committee and what perspective you think you're going to bring to the committee in our conversations. So first off, we have Jeff Ruffy, I believe that's how you pronounce it, who's from Visit Denver, and he's going to be the Visit Denver representative. Previously it was Carrie. And so Jeff, if you're there, if you want to say a few words about joining the committee.
Sure. Yeah, name is Jeff Roof. Just look up and just like the housetop. Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration at Visit Denver. I've been here over 13 years, obviously heavily in the lodging tax. Worked very closely with Carrie her whole time here with all the various issues with short-term rentals, et cetera. So obviously very much in our mission, et cetera. So happy to be on this committee.
Thanks, Jeff. Roof. I'll make sure to pronounce it correctly. But thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate having Visit Denver engaged in this committee. Next up, we have Susan Pierce from the Denver Metro Area Association of Realtors. And she will be replacing Sabrina, who was previously on the committee. And so Susan, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Susan Pierce representing DMAR. And I was really interested in getting on this committee because I was on planning board when the ordinance was passed. So I heard a lot of testimony and I think I know the intent of the ordinance. And I'm also a member of DMAR Government Affairs. And we look at short-term rental ordinances around the metro area. So I hope to be able to bring some different perspectives.
Thank you, Susan. Glad to have you on board. Oops. Next, we have Tyler Woolsey, who is a short-term rental host. Tyler has participated previously in STRAC through the public comment portion, and so we're glad to see that he's now stepped onto the board as a member. Tyler, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, hey everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Tyler Woolsey. I've been an STR host in Denver for about 1.5 years now. And I've really enjoyed being a host, so hoping that I can provide that perspective to everyone here and see if there's anything I can help with, being an STR host and maybe not being on the city side or one of those types of things. So anyways, it's nice to meet you all, and I'm excited to get to know you all a little bit more.
Thanks, Tyler. And Tyler's going to be joining our current hosts that are staying on the committee, and that's Buffy, Susan, and Michael. And I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves once we're done with the new members. Next up is Jimmy Hernandez. Jimmy has a handyman business and also owns, I believe, some investment property in the community. And so I'm really looking forward to his perspective on things. But Jimmy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jimmy. I'm a native to Denver. I've been investigating short-term rentals for friends and family. And in doing that, I kind of got on the newsletter and have been reading a lot of the codes, etc. It's interesting to me. I think it's a great way to solve some of our housing and rental problems in the city. So that's my interest. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Jimmy. And the next, and then Emmett and Caleb are going to be our non-hosts that are going to be joining the committee. And so next up is Emmett Hobley, who is from the Montbello neighborhood, and learned about the committee through other RNOs that were involved in our search for applicants. So we're really glad that we were able to reach Emmett and that he'll be bringing the Montbello neighborhood perspective. Emmett, you want to say a few words?
Yes. My name is Emmett Hobley. I'm a community activist, have a neighborhood organization. Also, I'll be represented in a neighborhood corporation. We are very interested in the group living amendment. We followed it extensively, and we're totally behind it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. And then we have Kayla Greathouse, who is also representing the non-host community, and Kayla has some experience advocating on housing issues, and so we're really glad to see her join as well. Kayla?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm in the Green Valley Ranch neighborhood, and so, I'm really interested in this. I'm an urban planning undergrad, and a lot of my time in New Orleans, when I lived with my family there, I saw the negative side of short-term rentals. I don't see that in Denver. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. So I'm just happy to be on the board, and provide some type of insight so we can make sure that it continues to stay on the track that it's on.
Thank you, Kayla. Glad to see a perspective from outside the state, recognize some of the challenges that other jurisdictions are having. And I'm also from Arizona, and so I'll quite often bring up horror stories from Arizona and the unregulated short-term rental market there as well. So be prepared to hear some stories. And then I did want to mention, Emmett, that the INC, Loretta over at INC, is actually going to be selecting an additional person. And so, we're really happy to have you on board representing your neighborhood and representing the community at large. And so there will just be an additional representative from the community and from the neighborhoods as well. So we're holding that spot to see if Loretta is able to get back with a recommendation. But again, all of the non-host community members and hosts as well are, all representing the community in the various neighborhoods. So I'm glad that you're all on board. And then I also just wanted to mention the city and county side of things, just so that our new members know who to reach out to and who the city folks are. And so we'll start with Councilman Flynn. He represents District 2. I believe he had a scheduling conflict with this meeting, and so wasn't able to attend, but he regularly attends and engages with the community in a committee in a meaningful way. And then next up we have Councilwoman Sawyer. Councilwoman, are you on the?
Yep,
there she is.
I'm here.
Excellent.
Hey, I'm just listening and turning off my my camera. But thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Councilman Flynn and I are the two city council representatives that sit on the STRAC committee. Thank you and welcome to the new members. And thank you so much to our continuing members as well. We are the resource for, all things legislative when it comes to, potentially making changes or talking through ideas, and also have a lot of background when it comes to things like budget and former conversations regarding short-term rentals in our city. So thanks for having me. It's nice to meet those of you I'm just meeting for the first time, and don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do to support you. My office email is denvercouncil5@denvergov.org. So feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's really nice to have council members on the committee and engaging directly with community members on these types of issues. After the meeting, I'll go ahead and send out a list with everybody's name and contact information. That way everybody can reach out to the various members and get organized that way. So next up, we've got Molly Duplashane, who is our Director of Excise and Licenses. Excise and Licenses is where the short-term rental program lives. We're the ones that run the program. And so, and Molly was recently named director or appointed Director of Excise and Licenses. So congratulations to her as well. That was a couple months now, but fairly new.
Can I just jump in real quick, Alex? Do you mind? Yep. So hi, I just wanted to welcome the new members, and again, thank the continuing members. We've had a lot of great conversations over the last couple of years and have really utilized the input and feedback that we've gotten from this committee to make changes, or whether that's legislative policy changes or just operational changes. Notifying hosts when they receive a complaint regarding noise or trash or something. That came out of an idea from this committee, and then the policy changes that we passed in 2020 and 2021 were also heavily vetted and discussed with this committee. So it's a great, useful committee, and I hope you new members can find some value in it, and I know we will find value in having your voices at the table. And so, Alex, I think we'll go into this next, but many of you probably have heard that Erica Rogers is coming back to excise and licenses to fill my old position as policy director. So this will probably be my last STRAC meeting for a little while, and we'll let Erica fill in those shoes. And I'll always come back and join in these meetings if there's a topic or something that you all want to hear from me on, or that you want me to be here to discuss. But I really have appreciated everybody's time and effort and contributions to the committee over the last couple of years. And of course, I'll continue to get updated from Alex and Erica, but we'll probably kind of step back from the meetings a little bit, given my new role in being the final decision maker in some of these other licensing and short-term rental cases. So thanks again, and welcome to the new members.
Thank you, Molly. And I'll give Erica a chance to introduce herself. Just really quick, some business etiquette. Just wanted to make sure usually what we ask that when you're not speaking, that you mute your microphone, and then obviously you're welcome to have your camera on or off as you're comfortable, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. Erica?
Thanks, Alex, and thank you so much, Molly. Like she said, for those of you that don't know, I have been in the city attorney's office for almost a year now, but coming back officially starting on Monday as the new policy director at Excise. So I'm excited to be back in the swing of things, especially with short-term rentals, and looking forward to joining the STRACs.
Thanks, Erica. And I'm Alex, policy analyst for the committee, and I'm new to the city of Denver. I moved in June of last year, so relatively new. It's going to be coming up on a year. It went by really fast, and I've been with the city of Denver for about 9 months. Really excited to continue working with the STRAC committee on these various conversations, and I'm going to go off camera again. So I just wanted to be able to put a face to a name. Next up, we have Alex Cobell, who I believe is our highest ranking licensed inspector at the moment. Our supervisor for the investigations team has recently changed positions and moved over to the city attorney's office. So we are hiring for our supervisor of investigations. But for now, Alex is our senior investigator. And so Alex, do you want to say a couple words? He focuses on short-term rentals specifically as well.
Hi, I'm Alex. I know most of you have been involved with short-term rental regulation in one form or another for a very long time. So excited to continue the work.
Thank you, Alex. And Alex is C is Alex Classical or Alex #1, Alex Cobell, so that we can don't get confused with the two Alexes. Next up, we have Polly Kyle, who works for our Department of Housing Stability host. She's a housing policy officer and is our connection to that office. I'm not sure if she was able to join today. Oh, there she is.
Here.
Hey, Polly.
Hi. Yeah, I am Polly Kyle. I'm a representative from the Department of Housing Stability. I do policy work for our housing and homelessness resolution departments, and here representing host on this committee.
Thank you, Polly. Really glad to have you. I'm here to join us. And then lastly, we have Ken Martinez, who's the tax audit manager for Department of Finance. Ken usually joins us when we have a topic that's specific to revenue or taxes or something like that. We're not really covering that issue today, so I'm not sure if he has joined us, and it doesn't look so, but glad to have Ken here when we do have those types of questions. So now let the current members of the committee introduce themselves, and I'll go down the list here, starting with Susan.
Hi, Alex, and congratulations to Molly, Erica, all the new roles. That's amazing news. And welcome to all the new members of STRAC. I am a STRAC member that is returning and a short-term rental host. And I believe the work we do on STRAC is so critical for our community. And all these new voices and backgrounds and experiences are only going to enrich the overall STRAC community. So it's great to be with you all. And thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Susan. And next up will be Cindy. Oh, Cindy, you're on mute.
Oh my goodness, I have to do both. Hi, this is Cindy Sestridge, and I've been around since the beginning of the legislation that we started forming many years ago, and continue to be interested in supporting the residents of Denver. And I welcome all the new people. We have a very understandable ordinance, and I hope we all continue to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but the committee will have 4 non-hosts and 4 STR hosts. So it was important that we strike that balance. And I will be going through kind of some of the history of the ordinance and the program in later slides, but just wanted to mention that in case you were wondering. Next up, we have Dana.
Hi, everyone. Dana Lubner here. I've been serving, I think it's been 2 years, pandemic time. We'll do that to you. I'm coming to the committee with enthusiasm for the fact that our city has a committee like this. I work with organizations around the country that help short-term rental communities find a sustainable path that works out for everyone. And this model is not seen elsewhere, or at least rarely seen elsewhere. So I'm grateful to our city and for the folks that are keeping this group going. I serve as a founding member of the hosting community group called the Mile High Hosts. And I come from short-term rental property management as a background. So a bunch of different hats within the short-term rental community space. Grateful to be here.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned if as people introduce themselves, you could mention what perspective you bring or the organization you work for. That's also helpful. So thank you for mentioning that, Dana. Next up, we have Daniel Cohen.
Hi, everybody. Dan Cohen. I've been on the committee for a little while. I take an industry perspective, but with a public policy optimization mindset. That's how I think about this. And I got here because I founded a company called Daydream, which is now called Central, which is a large national STR and residential hybrid company, and it owns the big residential building with the Whole Foods in it down behind the station. We bought that. That was one of our first assets. And then I don't work with Central anymore, but I do work with a lot of STR companies, mostly national ones. I'm on the board of Front Desk here, and have a couple other roles as well. So that's the perspective. That's what I bring. I've really enjoyed my time on the committee, and I look forward to more of this. Congrats to all the new members, and yeah, it should be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's see. Oh, Lisa, Karen Welch.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the new members. It's so fun to have some new faces in the group. My name is Lisa Karen Welch, and I have been educating real estate agents and their clients for the last 10 years on short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units. I work for the company ADU for You. They're a modern carriage house builder. I've been on this committee I think like Dana said, we got on it at the same time. We've never actually been to a live meeting. So it would have been COVID, right around the time of COVID, which is a couple of years. And I was recently selected to be a member of the ADUs in Denver Advisory Committee, which has been super exciting to be on both these. So I love this committee, and it's such a joy to be a part of it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we have Michael Murphy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Murphy. It's great to be here and to be with all of you. I'd like to echo Susan's congrats to Molly. Molly, I remember back in the day when you used to host these meetings. It seems like just yesterday. And Erica, it's really exciting to have you back on this committee as well. We're all really lucky to have you involved with the committee again. Also, welcome to all of the new members. I have to say, I love kind of the real estate themed last names, Jeff Roof and Kayla Greathouse. I feel a bit left out. I don't have a real estate related last name. So, so that's kind of cool. We've got some real estate themes going on, very relevant to this committee. Like several of the other committee members, I wear a couple hats as well. I started out on the committee as a non-host, and during my time on the committee, I became a host. I'm a licensed real estate broker, 15 years plus, licensed CPA of 15 years plus, and also bring the perspective of I've served on currently serving on the board of a high-rise building downtown that currently permits short-term rentals, and so there's some unique high-rise short-term rental issues that I'm able to speak to as well and represent on the committee. And thanks again to everyone for being here and for letting me be a member of the committee. Really enjoy it.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really glad to see the energy and the rejuvenation here, people in new roles, new committee members. And so take that energy into the new term here for the committee. I'll kick us off by, obviously our current members will know this, but for our new members, a brief history here of the ordinance here. Going back even actually before this slide, I wanted to mention that VRBO was actually one of the first short-term rental booking platforms to come online. It launched in 1995. That was followed by Booking.com in 1996. So these were the first platforms where you could reserve space in someone else's vacation rental. Airbnb started then in 2008. And it was the first platform to allow someone to rent a single room or space in a home where the homeowner was still there. Airbnb has grown exponentially, obviously, over the years. It started going from about 10,000 users and 2,500 listings in 2009 to the current estimate. And I think that I pulled this article from like 2016, maybe it was 2019, but around 150 million users and over 6 million listings around the world. So quite an explosive growth in the short-term rental industry, which then led in later years to some issues in jurisdictions where they were not being regulated at all at the beginning. And so this led to some issues in neighborhoods, as you're all probably aware with, again, I'll give the example of Arizona, where there's no short-term rentals. In fact, in 2015, the legislature passed a preemption that prevented cities from regulating short-term rentals any differently than any other house on that street or in that neighborhood. They have to be treated exactly the same. And so what's happened there is not only do you have the issue of party houses, right, where you've got, somebody is living in a house and their neighbor is having different guests over every week, and the owner is never there, but there's no primary residence requirement, right? That means that nobody has to actually live in that house. And so you have a situation where in Arizona, you have investment banks, you have investment companies buying up, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses on the same street, turning them all into short-term rentals, and then just constantly turning people in and out without anybody actually having to go back to that home and deal with, fines or tickets or angry neighbors or, things that are broken or damaged, because they can just call a service to come and clean everything up, fix everything up, and then bring in new guests. And so like, for example, in Sedona, you've had so many of these investment companies buy up property there that estimates range from between 25% and 40% of the housing in Sedona is short-term rentals. So compare that to in Denver, where we have less than 1% of our housing stock is being used as short-term rentals. So quite a big difference. It comes from our primary residence requirement, but you can see here in 2015, as issues started to arise like they did around the country, the city of Denver started doing public outreach and stakeholder input on a potential ordinance. And then in 2016, Denver passed the initial short-term rental licensing ordinance. So one of the early adopters of a requirement to have short-term rentals get a license. And now we see across the country more and more jurisdictions every day are starting to begin regulating short-term rentals, and some are requiring permits or licenses. And we'll mention some things about what's happening in other jurisdictions around that a little later. In 2017, on January 1st, the license began to be required of short-term rentals. So it's been 5 years now that we've had the program up and running, and are having some good some successes. And there are other jurisdictions and other organizations that are reaching out to Denver and asking, what are our best practices? How did we get to where we are here? And really being a model for how short-term rentals can be regulated to balance the needs of the community with the needs of individual property rights and individual folks trying to move ahead in by using their real estate, their home, to gather more income. And then in 2020, just a couple of years ago, the council voted to bolster our primary residence requirement and enact other accountability measures for the booking providers as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about those in the next slide, I believe. Oh, before we get there, just generally speaking, short-term rentals create opportunities, but they also come with some risks and challenges. Some of the opportunities are the opportunity to create additional income for Denver residents. So a lot of folks use it to, buy their first house. They count on that income to help them, or to just generate additional income for whatever expenses or investments they want to make, whether in their family or education or just generating wealth. It also fosters diversity. So tourists appreciate being able to have different experiences. So sometimes short-term rentals can be more affordable than traditional hotels. They offer just a different experience. And so if you're looking to stay in a particular area, or quote unquote live like a local, short-term rentals give that opportunity. And I know I've stayed in them before and had good experiences in other cities. And so they're good for tourists, they're good for hosts, and they can drive additional economic activity, right? So local hosts can recommend restaurants or different services or areas, different businesses that they use that tourists might not know about. So a hole-in-the-wall restaurant that's really great, but a tourist would never have thought to go there unless a local host had let them know about it. So lots of benefits there. On the other side, there are some risks, some challenges, and first among those is the impact on the housing stock. The way that Denver has handled that has been by requiring that you can only get a short-term rental license for a property that you live at, that's your primary residence. So that that has a huge impact on mitigating the loss of housing options. Like I mentioned in Sedona, especially in small communities that are tourist driven, they have limited housing stock already. A lot of their economy is kind of built around hotels. And so if you have got a small community with limited housing options and those start to go away and you start to lose business at your hotels in very, very significant amounts, it has a spiraling kind of effect. And so luckily, because we have a primary residence requirement, we're able to mitigate a lot of that impact on the housing market. It doesn't mean that there isn't any impact at all, but as we've reviewed here in this committee, it's been fairly limited in Denver. And of course, there's always the issue of, the second and third bullet point are kind of related to essentially the neighbors and the impact on the neighbors, right? Is having people coming and going, there's trash, there's noise. And then if you have guests that are particularly disruptive or doing unsafe things, we've all heard about how party houses around the country that tragically have resulted in violence being committed there. Those are kind of the most extreme examples, but nonetheless, it's all related to what I call externalities, right? It's good for this kind of business is good for the host, it's good for the guests, but we have to be mindful of the neighbors as well and their rights to live in peace and quiet. So, and again, the primary residence requirement also is helpful here because we have somebody that's going to come home to that place, right? They're going to come home to their neighbors that, might be upset about something. They're going to be, coming home to their home that they, would want to keep clean and safe and not have it be disrupted or being damaged in any way. So that helps with that as well. It's a unique requirement among jurisdictions to require that they live there, but it's been very effective, and hopefully it's something that spreads across the country and others start to adopt the same kind of policy. Very quickly, I'll run through these. At any point, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. We've got a number of slides that we have to get through, so I want to make sure that we get through the information. I'll try and go through it a little bit quickly, but please feel free to stop me with any questions. So first, our program is built on every short-term rental needs a license, and so if you don't get a license, you can be getting into quite a bit of trouble. And so our first priority is to make sure that every short-term rental is licensed, and we're very proud of our compliance rate and the work that we've done to increase the proportion of folks that are licensed in this business, and getting rid of the unlicensed proportion of STRs that are out there. Again, every short-term rental, it has to be the primary residence of the host. I'll wait till the next slide because we've got a little bit more on the primary residence requirement, but we verify that information in various different ways. We look at your voter registration, your driver's license, your tax information. So we try and establish that it's your primary residence through a number of different ways, and that's where Alex Cobell and his team look at applications and try and make sure that we only issue licenses to those that have shown that it is their primary residence. One of the tools that we use is an affidavit, so we'll have somebody sign under penalty of perjury that that it is in fact their primary residence. And early on, we did do some aggressive enforcement on that. There was a situation where there was a couple of hosts that signed these affidavits, and then it shown that they weren't in fact it was not their primary residence, and so going through that process really showed that the city was very serious about this requirement and about folks being honest with us when they're filling out forms. And so since then we've had good numbers with our compliance, and have had a really good relationship with applicants, and them understanding that we just need to make sure that they're following the rules, so that we're not we're being fair with everyone and having the results that we want. Another part of the program is that every advertisement for a short-term rental needs to display their business license number. So that's another way that we crack down when folks post advertisements for a short-term rental that don't have a business license number. We can get those taken down, and then we're able to kind of track the short-term rentals through their business license number and their advertisements. We have a contract with a data company that scours or scrapes the internet for advertisements for short-term rentals, and then compiles all that data, and it shows us where these rentals are, what the address is, how often they'd be rented, all kinds of information. So that also helps us identify unlicensed rentals, or for example, if somebody is renting their house, 360 days a year, and they don't have an ADU and all the rentals are for their full home, we might start to question whether they actually live there or not. So that's a very helpful tool, is to have that contract that we have with that data company. And then short-term rentals have to abide by all of our safety, tax, zoning, and insurance requirements that are part of the program. I won't go into detail on those, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'll show you a resource in the next couple pages that will connect you to our actual rules and regulations, so you can read them yourself and find out about all those specifics. And then at the end of the day, if we do find people are violating, whether they don't have a license or they have a license and they're running it in an unsafe manner, or they've been untruthful in their talks with us, we can levy fines and other penalties. We can suspend their license or revoke their license entirely. So those are the tools that we have to enforce our requirements. So again, I'll just very briefly again talk about the primary residence requirement. It preserves our housing stock. It protects residents and neighborhoods. It is a benefit to the host as well, and it's a benefit to the visitors and local businesses. It is kind of the centerpiece of our program. Other jurisdictions that don't have this really struggling to get this issue under control to a degree that's satisfactory to the community. And so very important part of our program. We talk about it a lot here. I won't talk about it more here, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So now, after the ordinance passed, the city formed the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, and the committee advises the Department of Excise and Licenses on the program and our policies and any changes that we might need to make or consider. And we also study these issues so that we can learn more about them, and use this committee as a way to gather input from you all and from other community members. And sometimes you ask questions that we didn't ask. Sometimes we ask questions that the committee members didn't think of. And so when we all come together and study these issues as a team, as a whole, we can shine some light on these. Sometimes we consider it a problem, sometimes we consider it an opportunity, but it helps us kind of navigate these issues and think about them in different ways. And so some of the things that we have looked at in the past are our compliance rate, right? So right now, I think we're somewhere between 85 and 90% compliance. And so very, very proud of that number. Our former supervisor of investigations, Brian, did a very good job, worked very hard to get that rate up. And so we really appreciate his efforts, and we'll look at those rates from time to time. Like, as I just mentioned, how we enforce our primary residence requirement. There is no minimum amount of days that a host has to quote unquote live or stay at their own house. So, if they travel a lot, or if they have an ADU, for example, they can rent it out every single day and live at the home and still live at the home. So there's no limit cap on the number of days that a short-term rental can be rented. And that was part of the initial discussion when it was developed, that requirement. But the balance is you do have to live there, and you do have to show that you live there. Other things we've looked at are the type and frequency of STR complaints. The most common are going to be noise, trash, traffic, or parking. Actually, parking more specifically, and you can imagine why. So we work to resolve those issues. We have a process for neighbors to file complaints about a property, and we track those numbers, and we track the types of complaints that come in. And as I'll show later, because our program has been successful, we've gotten a huge reduction in the number of calls and complaints that we get. And that's, I think, a result of the program being improved, on a day-to-day basis by our team. We looked at the impact on neighbors and the quality of life issues. We sometimes have members of the public, give testimony about their experiences or problems that they've been having in their neighborhood. And so we think about, ways that we might be able to mitigate that. Disability access in the short-term rental market. So that's a topic that we looked at recently. We know from anecdotal evidence that there's a lack of units that are accessible to the community with disabilities. And so we're exploring some options for improving that situation, namely potentially gathering some data, working with the host community on education on how to improve accessibility and particularly avoid any type of discrimination. A lot of the platforms have adopted non-discrimination policies, and so learning about those and sharing information about that, and then facilitating, if somebody does call us with a complaint about a short-term rental, is facilitating their ability to file a complaint with that platform about that host. As I mentioned before, we've looked at the impact that short-term rentals have on the housing market. This list is essentially to give a kind of update for our new members so that they know what we've looked at in the past, and for our current members to kind of refresh their memory about what we've looked at. We can always go back and look at these issues again, but wanted to share this with the committee so that you know that we have looked at this issue before. And if you wanted a briefing, for example, to say, what did that conversation look like, or which presentation should I take a look at? What questions have been asked or haven't been asked, what data is available, things like that, so that way we're not retreading kind of the same conversations, but people can get up to speed to where the committee has gone already, and then advance that conversation further. Last two items on the list are using ADUs, or these are accessory dwelling units for our new members. So it's basically, it could be a detached guest house, it could be a basement unit, it could be an attic unit. It's anything that's an accessory dwelling to the main house. And then the taxes and fees that short-term rentals pay. This page are just some good resources for our new members. This page in particular will take you to a web page that has all these other links on it. And so if you're interested in learning more about the ordinance or our rules or tax information or zoning, that's all going to be on that same page. So I will, and you all should have received the presentation in your email. It's also posted on our website for the short-term rental advisory committee. So you should be able to find it there. And then I really recommend signing up for the short-term rental bulletin. That is a bulletin that anybody can sign up for it. It's got a lot of hosts on it, a lot of committee members are on it. We send updates if we have a policy change, or if it's a reminder about something coming up. One of the things that we're thinking about sending out tomorrow actually is a notice about a new type of scam that I don't know if it's new, but it's a kind of a scam that's come to our attention. I believe Cindy's the one that brought it to our attention. And that is people that are posting fake listings. And it could be a real short-term rental that's being posted by somebody who is not the host, or it could be just a made-up location, or they're kind of grabbing pictures from one place and posting the address of another place. But basically they're after guests' money. They want them to pay the deposit, and then I believe Cindy said that people sometimes show up at a house that's either not a short-term rental or that wasn't expecting a guest, and the guests are out their deposit, and the homeowners are confused and probably a little scared too about strangers showing up at their door. And so sending out a reminder to hosts that you can reverse search images on Google, for example, images of your home that you've posted online. You can search for your license number, you can search for your address, and just checking out some of the platforms and making sure that if there are advertisements up with your information, that it's you that's posting it and not somebody else. And then, if you do find fraudulent activity, requesting that from the platform that it be taken down, or reporting it to us, and we can see if we can pass that information on to the appropriate authorities. But just wanting to let people know about this new trend that's happening. So that's why that bulletin is a good resource to just stay up to speed on what's happening in both within our program, and just kind of sometimes when we come across new information. And so this is the portion of our meeting that we go through. Every meeting we'll go through some data related to short-term rentals. For our next meeting in August, I'm going to rework these slides so that they're a little bit easier to look at and read and kind of understand. But for now, I'll just go through what the information that we do have. Pending applications, so those applications that have been submitted and are in the process of being processed. And so you can see that as of May 6th, we had 306 total pending applications. 108 were pending the applicant to take some action. So sometimes we will kick those back to the applicant and say, you're missing some information here, or we could use more information in this area. 119 applications are currently under review by excise and licenses. 57 are pending review by another city agency. 22 are awaiting formal denial from the city attorney's office. And then for new applications, we received 194 total applications in February, 222 in March, and 244 in April. And you can see the numbers there for new short-term rentals and renewal applications as well. This slide shows the trends over several years. And so the gray bar is 2019, the blue bar is 2020, the orange is 2021, and then the green is this year. And you can see that in 2019, the level of new applications was pretty high. And then in 2020, it dropped off. COVID really curtailed a lot of travel. And so big drop off there. And then, 2021 kind of had similar numbers. And then 2022, it does look lower, but you can see that it's trending upward. So in March and April, we had more new applications than we did in those same months the prior year. And also last year was one of the best years actually for the short-term rental market across the country. So it is coming back in a big way after a big slowdown during COVID. And these are for renewal applications. So kind of
Alex,
yeah.
it looks like Susan's got her hand up. She might have a question.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's hard to keep my eyes on all these screens. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. I was interested in an earlier slide where it said, I think 22 are awaiting denial by the city attorney's office. So what would put you in that category, I guess?
So probably most commonly, I'm I don't know if Erica, if you want to jump on this one, or if you want me to kind of speak generally about it. But in general, a lot of the things we find is it's not somebody's primary residence. Okay. It could be that they yeah, that's the main reason I think that we would deny a license outright. There could be other reasons. It's in a structure that's unpermitted, or
We typically actually, so just for some background, the causes for denial are in the ordinance. I'll drop that in. If there's a chat here, let me see. There's a Q&A, but I can drop it in the Q&A. But there is a list of causes for denial. The most common is primary residence. The second most common, I would say, is good cause, which is defined in the ordinance and can be evidence that the short-term rental has been operated in a manner that's unlawful. So that's renting without a license, failure to pay administrative fees and fines, or a big one we see is folks who are using duplexes, which are not a primary dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit, but two primary dwelling units, which is against the zoning code. So those are the top reasons. But if you have specific questions about a specific denial, feel free to email me and we can chat offline about that.
Thanks. That helps a lot.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. And thank you for jumping in, Erica, to make sure that information was accurate. And then this slide shows applications and disciplinary action. So for new and renewal applications, withdrawals are when the applicant withdraws their own application for whatever reason. They change their mind, they don't have the right documents, or can't prove it's their primary residence. Whatever the reason, they'll withdraw their own application, and those are the numbers there. Closed administratively is when we request more information from the applicant, and after a certain amount of time, if they don't respond to us, I think it's a full year. I might be wrong there, but I think it's a full year that they have to respond and give us that information. If they don't, it's closed automatically. So you could see the numbers for closed administratively there. And then calendar requests. So that's sometimes we will request for new, or more common for a renewal application, because they shouldn't be renting without a license. But for a renewal application, we will request their calendar, which shows how many nights they've been renting, so that we can get a better sense of how they're running their short-term rental, whether they, it's likely that they live there, and how often they're renting it. It's mostly to try and verify that it's their primary residence and they're not renting it so often and in a manner that would suggest that they're not there if they're renting the whole house. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Cindy, you have a question?
I do. Could you go over what happens when someone is found to be renting illegally, if they're not a primary resident, whatever the illegal part of it is? What is the penalty?
That one, I don't know if Alex or Erica or Molly want to jump in.
So it will depend specifically on, the circumstances right at play. Each case is just a little different, but typically if there's no primary residence, then either a new application or a renewal application can be denied. Those are more common than a show cause, but any licensee, if it's found that they're violating any of those provisions in the code, can also have their license penalized or revoked. So that would be the result of a show cause hearing, in which case a hearing officer would hear the facts and then recommend an appropriate penalty up to and including suspension or revocation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Erica. So then the numbers for the affidavits, again, so that we send an affidavit to an applicant for a new or renewal license, and we have them sign it. We send them the affidavit which states that it is their primary residence, and then they return it signed, obviously. And so we have pretty high numbers for the returned affidavits. Most of them that we send out, they get returned, and then we're satisfied that we have a tool to enforce that requirement if in fact they are not being truthful. And most people, I think, at this point are going to be reluctant to sign an affidavit that's untrue. And so we're having real good success with that aspect of our program. And then show cause, what Erica was talking about. So it's a hearing to show good cause, why they shouldn't lose their license. So when we talk about a show cause hearing, it's when we've called in a licensee to demonstrate why we shouldn't penalize or take their license away. So that's what a show cause is. And there are 0 outstanding show causes right now. These numbers are for our 311 system. So 311, you can call or email with a question, a complaint, something like that. You can see the vast majority of the calls and emails we get are about the application. So people have a question about the application. General questions under general inquiry. Notice of violation is when we actually send a notice to the short-term rental host that they are in violation of the law. We can send these to any licensee to give them notice that they're in violation of something, and it often includes a fine. Sometimes we'll give the first one is a notice of violation that doesn't include a fine, but then later we can issue fines for continued violations. And then property complaints. These are for just this year. You can see that we've, in the 5 to 20 range per month is the number of calls or emails that we're getting about short-term rental properties at this point, which is remarkably low compared to other jurisdictions. This has kind of similar information, but it's you can see across the years. And so again, you can see in 2019, we had 511 property complaints. That dropped down to under 300 in 2020, and then under 200 in 2021. And then we're down to, this is only for up to May for this year, but only gotten to 55. Some of this drop could be COVID, but we're hopeful and we're thinking that it's also related to our program improving over the years and people getting used to our rules and regulations and learning to live better with amongst their neighbors. I'll leave that there on that page. And then there's just a breakdown of the proportion of the different types of calls and emails that we get about the program. You can see in all years, the vast majority are about the application, and almost 80% now of the calls and emails we're getting now are about the application. And we've got, you can see the volume is also going down as well. Then this is the last slide. It's about lodger's tax. So short-term rental properties need to pay a lodger's tax. Lodger's tax is usually levied on hotels and motels, bed and breakfast, things like that. But short-term rentals, since they're kind of in some ways a similar kind of service, they also pay that same tax. And over the years, you can see the revenue that we've collected. Again, this is only for up to, year to date up to now. But over the years, you can see that it dropped in 2020, almost half. And then in 2021 came up again. It usually represents, from 7 to 8% up to about 12% of our revenue that we receive in lodger's tax. It comes from short-term rentals. And again, you can see it's on the rise as we get more and more short-term rental activity in the post-COVID recovery. Then we also go through some current events. So I like to highlight some stories that are in the news. The first one is we got some good press coverage about our compliance rate and how we're getting fewer complaints and more people are getting licensed. And so we're really happy about that. We're getting some attention for that. You can see other communities, even here in Colorado, are struggling. So Pitkin County, they're trying to adopt an ordinance up there, but they're finding it hard to get consensus on how to regulate short-term rentals. Some of the specifics can get tricky when you're trying to balance the different needs of the community. Breckenridge instituted a per bedroom fee. So if you have a 2-bedroom short-term rental, you're going to pay a certain fee. If you have a 10-bedroom short-term rental, you'll pay a higher fee. And then they cap the number of short-term rentals that are allowed within the city. Frisco increased their short-term rental tax by 5%. So some of the stories happening locally. And then across the country, I found this article that talked about how short-term rental regulations are spreading more and more, right? So smaller and smaller communities are starting to adopt regulations because previously, it wasn't as big of an issue, but now as time goes on and short-term rentals become more popular, both for hosts and for guests, you can see the trend is for more regulation. And I like that the article focused on both Colorado and Arizona and their different experiences. So very interesting article if you have time to look at that. Los Angeles, again, big city, big budget, it's been around a long time. They're struggling to get their compliance numbers up. They do require a permit for a short-term rental, but I think they're going to hire a vendor to help them get their compliance rate up because they're just struggling. I mentioned previously that Oahu, Hawaii, was considering an ordinance and now they've passed it. It essentially kind of does away with short-term rentals. If you're in a commercial district with other hotels and you're commercially zoned and you have a short-term rental, you can rent it, but it has a minimum of 30 days. So that's not really that short. And then if you're outside a commercial district, it's actually 90 days. So really they're essentially kind of done away with short-term rentals in Hawaii, that you can't rent for less than 30 days anywhere. And so again, very small community, limited housing stock, very reliant on hotels as part of their economy, very reliant on that limited housing stock to house their, native population of workers. And so all those things combined make it very difficult for a community like that to sustain a short-term rental market. Same as Sedona, right? It's a small community, limited housing, very reliant on tourism and particularly hotels. And then Clark County, which is where Vegas is, they have to allow short-term rentals now because the legislature there is requiring them to allow that use. And around the globe, Airbnb is working with the UN on temporary housing for Ukrainian refugees. So that's a big story. And then in Canada, Victoria, Canada is struggling with, again, an unregulated short-term rental market. So no primary residence requirement. And because of that, anyone can buy, 10 houses and turn them all into short-term rentals. There's no kind of limit. So they're struggling with that. And then Toronto, they're closing a loophole for what they're calling hired hosts. So we have a primary residence requirement. And in a jurisdiction like Toronto, people are able to kind of game that system by hiring somebody to live there. We know there are models out there where a company will help someone buy a house and live there so that they can rent part of it as a short-term rental. But at the end of the day, somebody is living there. Somebody is owning that property eventually. And so, it works out. But when you're able to skirt that requirement by hiring somebody else to just temporarily live there when they have a host, that's a problem. So just wanted to mention some of the trends out there. And then I also wanted to let either Dana or Erica talk about the event that the webinar that they hosted just a couple of weeks ago that had to do with ADUs and STRs. I don't know if either Dana or Erica want to mention something briefly.
Sure, I'll come off mute and share about it. The Mile High hosts have hosted a handful of educational series events over the last couple of years I've been in existence. And this would be, I think, our second one that we've partnered with the city on to bring education around ADUs. So we had Lisa Karen Welsh, who is on the call, is on the board here of STRAC from ADU for You present. And then we had Joshua and Abe from planning present as well. And then Erica presented about ADUs and short-term rental regulations and cleared up some of the misconceptions. And so that is been recorded, and so anyone that missed that says that we need more clarity around ADUs and expectations, and also maybe some hints about what might come in the future, feel free to reach out to me and I can get that link over to you. Alex, I did share it with you as well, so I can drop it if I have access to the chat for folks to watch the recording. But it was a great event with strong turnout and lots of participation.
Yeah, if you can drop it in the chat, that'd be great. We did send out a bulletin about the event, and all of our previous bulletins you can find on our webpage. And so again, another good reason to sign up for that bulletin so you can be up to speed on events that are upcoming. And then last slide that we talk about is our future meeting dates. And so the committee meets now quarterly. So our next meeting is going to be August 9th. So that'll give us time to follow up on some of the previous items that we were looking into around disability access in the short-term rental market. It'll give again, I'll share contact information so that everybody knows who they are. And if you want to reach out and, say hello or have coffee or something like that, the members can start to communicate. If you have a request to be briefed on a particular topic, we can cover those. So lots of time for us to prepare for the next meeting and make sure that we are having meaningful conversations at our meetings, and it's a good use of our time. The meeting after that in November, we're not sure which day it's going to be. Our meetings are usually the second Tuesday of the month, but November, there's an election in November, obviously, and the second Tuesday will be election day. So not sure if we're going to have it on the 1st or 15th, but we'll let you know as soon as we settle on that. And then possible topics, again, we're looking at our enforcement policies and processes. I know there's been a lot of interest in that lately about how we, what are our policies for confirming primary residence? And so, or in other topics, zoning, things like that. So wanting to review that information for our hosts and our non-hosts and see if there's any suggestion changes there, or just even just to get everybody up to speed so they're aware, so that they can formulate questions or potential suggestions based on knowing exactly what we do already. Again, revisiting the disability access questions and whether we're going to be gathering data on that, or whether we should add a question on the application for when you for a short-term rental license, so that we would ask that question of all short-term rental hosts, or if we can gather some of that information from the platforms, what type of question we want to ask. So that's something we might revisit in a future meeting. And then others, the committee is always welcome to suggest topics. You can email us, you can raise them here. Again, that the time period between now and our next meeting is a good opportunity. Obviously, you know, we would hope that you didn't raise a new topic, you know, a week or a few days before, given that we've got all this time. If you want to spend a few weeks, you know, learning more about the subject and then saying, hey, I would really like for us to discuss this, and I think that here's an approach that we can take. You know, please reach out. The sooner the better, so that way we can prepare a meaningful conversation at that next meeting. I'll just pause here for a second before we go to public comment to see if anybody had any questions or general comments. I don't know if Molly or Erica or any of our excise and licenses team want to jump in with any, you know, facts or news or comments or anything like that. And then if not, we'll jump over to public comment, but let me just check to see if anybody has their hands up. Doesn't look like it. So we made good time, folks. We'll get some time back here at the end of the meeting, but just really glad to see everybody really engaged and have new faces and new energy, and that we're all on the same page now. You know, our current members and our new members all know, you know, where the committee has been, and we can start to chart a path forward together. So if there's nothing else, I will look over in our public attendees section, and those of you who are attending from the public, if you want to ask a question, if you can access the raise your hand function, and that way I'll be able to call on you and move you over to be able to speak. It does not look like we have any public commenters today, so okay. Well, that is it, folks. Really glad to have everybody join and have everybody participate and know where we are. And again, I will send out contact information. Molly, I don't know if you want to make any closing comments.
I don't think so. Very good job, Alex. Very thorough. Good review of everything that we've been working on over the last couple of years. And just if anybody has any other topics that you'd like to discuss at these upcoming meetings, feel free to reach out and get them added to the agenda. And like I said, I'll pop back in one of these times in the next couple of meetings. But thanks again to everybody. It's always been a pleasure working with you. Not that I won't be continuing forward, but thanks for everything.
Dana, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I noticed that we have the Q&A feature on for today's meeting. I didn't know if that was something we were trying to incorporate in as an element of public comment, or if that was just on by mistake. But I did see a couple thoughts in there.
Yes, I did leave it on by mistake, but could be a useful tool. And so I'll just really quickly read them. It seems a duplex with the owner and the adjoining property would be an ideal situation for an STR. That zoning regulation could be changed. That's excellent input. Thank you for that. So just bore everyone with the reasons why. So in zoning in the code, it says that you can rent a short-term rental in an accessory dwelling unit, and it's the word accessory that's important there, that an accessory dwelling unit is accessory to the main use of the house. So a duplex would be two primary residences, and there's no, one isn't accessory to the other, and they're both, you know, meant to be primary residences. But that's certainly something that we could raise with zoning. Really appreciate that input. That's an astute observation, and we are meeting more with other city agencies around this program, particularly community planning and development, specifically about ADUs. So this could be a good question for us to ask them and see if they're interested in doing something around that. Second comment is the ADU application process spelled out clearly? I had zero guidance when I started. You might not get so many calls if there were clear directions to follow. So for ADUs, that is a process that community planning and development runs in terms of getting those permitted or zoned properly. We issue the license for you to short-term rent it, but it's community planning and development that would process an application to have an ADU either permitted or zoned. And then Matt says that I think a helpful topic for the next meeting is the bridge between the ADU guidance provided recently, yet does not align with the current planning language. So, you know, normally we would, we don't take questions or committee topics from the public, but glad to see Matt mention this. Again, we are meeting with community planning and development to try and, as you say, bridge there to make sure that our two agencies are working together seamlessly to make sure that we're being consistent and being clear in our guidance. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate that, and we'll be sure to raise that with community planning and development. And I'm not sure if we'll have the Q&A function on next time, but I thought it was a good, nice tool to get public comments so that we can you know, hear input and questions from the public, but it's not disruptive to our conversation as a committee. So I kind of like that tool. So we'll see about keeping that around. And if there's no other business, we're adjourned, and enjoy your evening. And again, I'll send out that contact information. Don't hesitate to start reaching out and making connections.
Great job, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Good night, everyone.